Welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Rahim Mohammed joins us now. He's a freelance writer based in Calgary, and his latest is for the National Post, where the headline is Justin Trudeau doubles down on disparaging Muslim Canadians. His piece begins with this other concise statement. Muslim voters helped the Prime Minister get elected. He shouldn't expect it to happen again. Rahim Mohammed is on the line. Rahim, welcome to the show.
Elias, thank you for having me. Big fan of your online social media presence.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's going very well on Twitter, let me tell you.
Yeah, you got some funny Tesla tweets.
So, Rahim, let me ask you this, okay? Explain to our listeners what is happening between the Prime Minister and the Muslim community. I don't think a lot of our listeners are aware of what's going on. Tell us why you had to write this piece.
Sure. So this kind of got buried in all of the Nazi stuff last week. But as you'll remember, I guess a few weeks ago now, there was the 1 million March for Children. And, Prime Minister Trudeau, among a number of political, public officials, issued statements that day that, we are against LGBT plus discrimination. We stand in favor of the LGBT plus community. But one of the things that was glossed over was the involvement of Muslim communities in the organization of those protests. And so you had subsequently, I believe last Monday, you had the Muslim Association of Canada, which is a 55,000 member, primarily Shia group, put out a statement condemning mischaracterizations made by Prime Minister Trudeau among other public officials, among school boards and media outlets, et cetera. But they called for these individuals, starting with the Prime Minister, to apologize for these misrepresentations and the harm they've done to the Muslim community, along with thousands of parents. So it's something that got lost in the shuffle last week, but I think it's something that could have a substantial consequence down the road, particularly when you look at the influence of Muslim communities in places like the Greater Toronto area.
And Rahim, there's something called the tolerance paradox. I think here now in this country, we have something that should be called the virtue signaling paradox. Have the Liberals just been caught up on things that are in conflict, and from the start have been in conflict, but when they go down the path of virtue signaling on social media, eventually you're going to end up in this predicament?
I think what happens is, when you're driven by social media, you and me are highly active on Twitter. You and me are very online, but most people aren't. The people who are highly active on Twitter are the people, who tend to reflect more the activist wings of the party. And you've had activists in the liberal side, activists on the progressive circle, saying things like the sort of gender pronoun policies are a matter of life and death. So you've had very heated rhetoric, on the left flank in activist circles, particularly on social media. And I think that is a lot of what's been pushing the messaging from the PMO and the messaging of a lot of the officials on the left.
And the Trudeau government, Justin Trudeau, has been very willing to even throw Quebec under the bus. The naming of Amira El-Gawabi, right, as what's her official title, the envoy, the special envoy on Islamophobia, right?
Yeah,
they did that despite knowing what it would do in Quebec. That's how high that is. But in light of what's just happened, do you think that the Liberals are at risk of losing the Muslim community as a whole as a voting bloc for them?
So you go back to 2015. So there were a lot of issues surrounding the Muslim community at play. So you had the niqabs at citizenship ceremonies issue. You had the barbaric cultural practices stitch line, which a number of people interpreted as a dog whistle at Muslim Canadians. And Muslim Canadians turned out in droves in favor of Trudeau. I think over 6 in 10 Muslim Canadians voted Liberal in that election. And that could have made the difference in a number of tightly contested races in the GTA. We don't really do exit polling in Canada, so it's hard to say how much that tipped the balance. But, about 1 in 10 voters in the Greater Toronto area, are practicing Muslims. So that's not a community you want to alienate en masse. And I don't know if all sort of Muslims are on the side of the MAC, but I think a lot of the Trudeau's sort of infantilizing of Muslims, this idea that Muslims are being brainwashed by algorithms on social media, a number of Muslims, even if they're not actively involved in these protests, will find that insulting. And I think the Trudeau government, Trudeau's painted himself in a corner on this issue.
So, who takes advantage of this, Rahim? What happens to this voting bloc? What else are we seeing? Because if the Liberals are going to lose them, they got to go somewhere.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you've seen common cause between the Muslim community and a number of conservative organizers, at least on this issue. So Pierre Poilievre tweeted a response to Justin Trudeau, sort of defending parental rights, defending the rights of parents to be involved in sort of what is being taught to their children. So I think this could be something that is really effective for the Conservatives in turning this community. As I'm sure you know, Poilievre's spouse, a Montreal gal, is actually an immigrant herself. So I think potentially the Conservative Party could use issues like this one to gain momentum, not just with the Muslim community, but with a number of different immigrant communities that they alienated during the Harper years. Immigrant communities, tended to be somewhat erring on the social conservative side on these sorts of issues.
Rahim, let's wrap up with this. I'd love your take from Calgary on how what we've seen in this country over the last couple of weeks, either maybe it changes or it reinforces an opinion that you've had about how Quebec has viewed secularism and laïcité. It was a few years back, Quebec said, sorry, religious fundamentalists cannot be teaching gay children in the classroom if they're going to wear a religious symbol that says that they don't have a right to exist, right? So we did that a few years back. So I think Quebec can sort of be more focused and less virtue signally on what's happening now with the whole gender stuff. Do you think does what's happened in the rest of Canada over the last little while, does it change your view on Quebec?
So a friend of mine, Anthony Kosh, he's based in Montreal. I believe you're connected to him as well. He had this great quote on Twitter a few weeks ago that progressives are slowly realizing that religions aren't just different costumes. You can wear at different cultural days, but sort of religious communities come with a set of principles, and those principles don't always align neatly with progressivism. So I think we're interestingly seeing the roles reverse, where, kind of 5-6 years ago, it was conservatives by and large, and it was sort of religious symbols in the public domain. Now it's sort of the progressive side, you can wear whatever you want, but, if you don't follow this agenda on sort of gay and trans issues, or, you don't follow this progressive suite of beliefs, you don't belong here in Canada. There was actually a incident in Edmonton where a school teacher straight up told a Muslim middle school student, hey, if you don't support, gay and trans rights, you don't belong here. You can't be Canadian. So it's interesting how we're seeing that reversal.
Rahim, we're going to have to leave it there. I'll tell all our listeners once again that your latest piece in the National Post is titled Trudeau Doubles Down on Disparaging Muslim Canadians. I think everyone should go check out that piece. Rahim, thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Elias.
That's Rahim Mohammed, freelance writer out of Calgary.